Blindspot Season 2, Episode 8, Her Spy's Mind. I really love this episode. I think there were a lot of really good storylines in it. We got some revelations by characters. We still have the ongoing mystery with Reade and Zapata because we really don't know what happened there. Reade is continuing to say that he didn't do it even at the end of the episode, where it's like his story is starting to conflict with itself, where if he actually did hear a noise and he ran straight upstairs, then he would have seen that, the coach was still actually choking to death. And maybe that's the case. I mean, maybe that's kind of what happened. Maybe he didn't even recognize the fact that he heard a noise. I wouldn't be surprised if there was some stuff going on there where he wasn't exactly, realizing time as it was really happening in that sort of crazy situation. And he may have gone through a big chunk of that tape and then finally realized, like, holy crap, I actually heard something happen, or there's like a final noise or something, and that's what he heard, and it was after everything else went down. Maybe whoever killed him, which I think might have been his friend who was living at his house, because he may have, messed him up, bringing all these crazy memories back, and that's why that guy was on the slump, and that's why he was with Reade in the last episode, because he kind of, he was trying to go and get all this evidence and get someone to testify, and he brought up all these horrible memories for, one of his old friends, and that kind of sent him back on a downward spiral. That's why his girlfriend kicked him out. That's why he had to stay with Reade. That's why he was back on drugs. And suddenly, Reade's knife is missing, and he doesn't know why. He said it broke, and he threw it out. So that could actually be the case. Maybe his friend knew that. Maybe his friend took it. Maybe he just was lying to begin with. It's really hard to tell. We don't know where it's going, but I think it was probably his friend. That seems like the most likely answer to me, because typically that's just how it plays out. I doubt it would end up being someone completely random. That's possible too, of course, and it's just like, man, this was just a crazy situation that he got involved in, where it just so happened that a random murderer came into the house. But during the scene where they kind of, they wait for the police to actually file a report and everything, excuse me, the guy that they really talked to, he doesn't mention like, oh, this was missing or this was knocked over. And it didn't look that way when they were in the house either. Everything seemed fine except for, you have this guy that Reade, of course, is looking into, and suddenly he's dead, stabbed multiple times, but his main cause of death was choking on his own blood. So there's still a mystery there. Who did it? Why did they do it? Just there are a lot of layers to it, so I'm not 100% sure how it's going to play out, but still very excited for it. I really enjoyed that portion. I'm really worried that they'll both end up falling into something really bad, both Reade and Zapata. And if not, Zapata for sure, because if Reade truly is innocent and he didn't do anything, like he had a little charge of breaking into a guy's house, that's nothing compared to some of the stuff Zapata did in this episode. Like, oh, it's obstruction of justice and stuff like that, and threatening this guy's girlfriend, which technically, his girlfriend was the one doing something illegal, but clearly that's a bribe situation. It's a blackmail situation. So that in itself is illegal. I'm sure there's some actual term for this, but she kind of thought maybe he did it. So it's like accessory after the fact, which she even says in the episode. So even if it's not crime, she's still assumed, oh, he may have done it, or she was working under the impression that it's possible he did it, and she still decided to help him, even if it wasn't for the murder. She's still an accessory to him breaking into the house. Plus, she, did her own thing with the blackmail stuff, trying to just help him out. So I'm really worried that things will kind of blow back on her more than they actually will on Reade, because he might end up coming out of this truly innocent, and then she'll actually be guilty of something. I mean, like I said, technically the B&E thing for him, but that'll be nothing compared to, of course, full-on murder charge. So now I'm a little worried that both of them might have some issues kind of going down the line. So I'm definitely worried about that. But that was a great storyline that I don't know if they'll really touch on that in the next episode. I'm sure there'll be some personal elements with this whole assassin thing going on with, all the characters kind of trapped together. But it probably won't be, the biggest focus in the next episode. But then we have our other storyline with Weller and Nas, where they actually go to Bulgaria to try to find this guy who leaked all this really super classified information. And things go nuts over there. I mean, they end up being followed by the new deputy director of the CIA, they end up finding out that this dude was completely framed this entire time. He was framed, and so he was, he freaked out and he left to Bulgaria. And instead of, or well, it started off with him being welcome as kind of like cyber protection for them, and then he kind of became their prisoner, just trapped in a hotel. So they have to go against him, or go against Bulgaria in the very beginning portion and sneak out of there. Then they seemingly have to go up against the CIA, and then we find out that this guy actually wasn't, working with the CIA. Those were like some random people, and he went in to kind of help them. He was super pissed off too. I thought it was funny. Like, he was like, I didn't have to come in here and risk my life. And it was funny when he mentioned, I'm like, he shot like one person in the back. He wasn't really doing much. Like, they killed everybody else. He came in at the last second and killed one guy. And he's like, I didn't have to risk my life to come in here and save you guys. And I'm like, he didn't really do that much. He's like, I know he shot a dude, but he didn't do that much to help them, get the guy, to get Winter out of there. And then he messed up because he was talking about how he tortured Jane, and he almost got choked out. But, well, it stopped. Nas was able to convince him that it, wasn't really worth it. And that comes after them actually having a pretty important scene, which unfortunately gets destroyed in this episode because of Patterson finding the actual bug in Robert's, space, his therapy room. So they actually end up having sex in this episode, which I wasn't expecting. I never really thought there was any sexual tension between them, just actual tension, because they kind of bonded a little bit. It was like, okay, we actually work together as a team. I didn't think they'd ever really take it to that point, especially with more recent stuff, because I thought he actually would be trying to make it work. I want to say her name's Allie, the one who's having his child. I thought he was actually going to try to make it work with her. I knew he was, initially his whole thing was like, just go ahead. But when he decided that it mattered, I thought he'd try to actually make it work with her, and then they slept together in this episode. And I was like, oh, I guess he's not doing that. I guess I kind of read that wrong. But they have their moment, and it's like, we can be more than, partners on a team. And then he gets hit with a bomb where Patterson ends up finding, this bug, and she's like, I'm pretty sure she's been listening in on our conversations. So now he kind of has to hold that secret as well. Patterson does as well. So I'm sure that'll be one of the big conversations in the next episode. Like, what are we going to do? How do we confront her? And can we even confront her? And it makes a difference with her being whatever in the NSA, which I thought was really funny. When the CIA guy came up to them and he's like, you're this, you're stuck in a wall, and he's like, and you, whatever your fake title is in the NSA. I thought that was really funny. I was like, that's actually really funny, because we really don't know what the heck her deal is. She kind of just has, this really important role. Like, they say her role, but it is NSA, so it's just kind of funny. Plus, they always, they've made a note before of her having like this random thing where it's like, yeah, I can do this. Like, I'll just, I'll call somebody, type an email, or do this or do that. And it's like, yeah, we got like some sort of super technology. And it's like, oh, interesting. And this is, this is where you are, but you got like all this insane stuff. So I thought that was funny, kind of referencing just the secretive nature of what they do. So I thought that was actually pretty cool. But just going through it now, having this knowledge out there where Patterson knows what's happening, and now Willa knows, and he has to figure out, how do I go about doing this? I'm excited to see that play out. And then of course we have kind of the mini story in this episode. Is Patterson and Robert, because they said his name after she called him David, which is very interesting. Their relationship stuff, I thought that was fine. I actually didn't hate that. Normally I'm like, I don't really care too much for relationship stuff if it's just like, because their relationship is kind of normal. It's not like dysfunctional like Weller and Jane's. That was kind of dysfunctional, where it's like he had an obsession with this girl, and it stemmed from them being childhood friends and the hatred for his father. There was a lot going in there, so it was like, that was really interesting, because there are a million different elements. And Patterson and Robert, they have a more conventional relationship, but also really like the two characters, so maybe that's why I care a lot more than a normal, like any other show. But I really enjoyed it. I thought it was fine. It was very simple, and she's, Patterson's trying to make it work. She thinks that, what she's doing, just undistorting the voices, is going to be like a really simple job, and it doesn't end up being that, and things kind of come to a head when she calls, Robert David. So I was like, okay, that I wasn't expecting for this episode. I thought it would just be, she'd be really upset that the job kind of took over in that moment. But then it became something way more when she called him David. So I was like, okay, I wasn't expecting that, but I didn't hate it at all. So curious to see where that goes, especially, the trailer, of course, they make it seem like Patterson, gets knocked out, and she'll probably literally only get knocked out, and it won't be anything dangerous, but, we'll see how that plays out. She's not an extra, so I'm pretty sure she'll be fine. She's not like they do in this episode, like when they blow the door open, and Weller and the other guy get knocked down, and Weller's like, are you okay? I'm like, I'm sure he'll get shot in 2 seconds, and of course, he is fine. As soon as he stands up and he points his gun, he just gets all shot up, and of course, Weller lives. So, based on that and all of television, I'm sure Patterson will actually be fine in this next episode, so I'm not worried about it. And then we also have like our third, big story in this episode, and that is Jane and her brother. And I really love their, what they did with them in this episode, because they've always had little glimpses. It's like, okay, we have Jane, or Remy if you prefer. So we have Jane, and then we have Roman, who we also find out is actually named Ian in this episode. So that kind of surprised me too. And we go through this really simple concept of them together, where it's kind of estranged at this point, and he's kind of off his rocker a little bit. She wants to be the sister that's able to convince him to be a better person, but she also has to be the agent who's kind of working on both sides of the fence, and she also has to freaking survive every mission she goes on, whether it's with the FBI or with Sandstorm. And I think that really came to a head in this episode, and that's kind of why I loved it. The whole thing was, it starts off where they can't have guns. So that's like her first thing that she enjoyed. It was like, alright, they do a little flashback. It's like improvising. She knows how he likes to improvise, where he just destroys everybody. So she's happy about that. And she's able to kind of go through, and the first person she saves is the woman, where she chokes her out instead of letting, Roman, stab her in the neck and kill her. And then they go through, the mission seems to be going fine. They find the woman's body. And then they have a really cool moment where Jane tells him, excuse me, she has to tell Roman, they don't know that they're fighting a war. And she does that because she doesn't want him to go all out insane. She doesn't want him to, just go nuts and kill everyone like he normally does, which led to a pretty cool fight scene, which I actually enjoyed that fight scene, where he dodged, 2 bullets that were, basically right here. He was dodging bullets, right in front of his face. So that was a cool little fight scene in an enclosed space, so I enjoyed that. But he doesn't kill them because of her words. He's actually convinced to not kill these people like he normally does. And they go through, and so she has this moment where she has the chip, and she uploads 1% of it, because it's literally that much, on that file. So she uploads 1%, and she has that flashback of how he got the scar, which was pretty intense with them being in an orphanage. I don't think they'll do a backstory on that, but that's a pretty insane little kid to beat up, another kid, and then cut his face, like that. So that was kind of insane when they showed that. I was like, I never would have expected him to have that scar from a fight when he was such a young kid. I could see if he was a teenager and all angst and stuff, and somebody tried to cut him or whatever. But this was they're still 10 and stuff, and 2 kids held him down while a third kid beat him up and punched him in the face, and then just cut his face to take a coin. So it was pretty insane to kind of get that little flashback. And because Jane has that, she kind of has a greater attachment to her brother, where she's like, man, that was a moment, it was new for her. It was that was a moment where I truly failed him, and I can't let that happen again. And of course, in this case, he will actually die. So I like how it all came to a head. She takes the chip out, and she goes to save her brother, and then that leads to some other, pretty cool action sequences, where she jumps out and knees a dude straight in the face, and they flip some people, and they're able to get to a different room. And they had another cool moment where Jane thought that the hallway was on, the left side, and Roman thought it was on the right side, and she's like, alright, I trust you. And, he was right, and she trusted him, and it brought them closer together. And especially at the end scene, when she opens up the little puzzle box, and it seems like it's just a wrapper, but then we get the flashback where a young Jane is like, hey, I'll get the coin back, But for now, just use this little wrapper, and it'll be basically it's your coin in disguise. It'll be disguised as something that no one wants, but it matters to you. And we actually see Roman laugh, which is kind of insane. So he actually laughs, and then he cries in her arms. I was like, this is not something I was expecting to have happen in this episode. So I really love the fact that their relationship truly, came together in this episode. And we also find out that Shepard it also isn't Shepard's real name. So they just have like code names for everybody. So it kind of makes me wonder if Remy is actually Jane's real name, because I thought it was Roman, unless Ian is like maybe his middle name, or Roman is his last name. I don't know. Like, it's hard to tell. I mean, I didn't consider that. Like, Shepard, I figured, was her last name. But I guess Roman could be his last name, which would make her Remy Roman. So that's probably not right. So I don't know. I'm assuming that's just a fake name that they gave him as well, or like a new name once they were in Sandstorm. So if they got caught, or I don't know, visualized on camera, they'd still have some other form of some form of registration, or like ID. I don't know how I got DNA from ID, but ID that has like a different name on it. But there's some interesting elements there, and then of course we get the end sequence where everyone comes together. We get the audio, and so we find out the first person is Roman, which I kind of figured during the scene. I was like, okay, that's clearly a guy. The other person was clearly a woman, and I thought it was going to be. I honestly thought it would be Roman and Jane. I figured that would be, considering they mentioned like, oh, it's the inception of Sandstorm. I thought it would have made a lot of sense that it could easily be both Roman and Jane, that she'd be involved there. But it turns out that it was Roman and Shepard, and for whatever reason, Weller knows who Shepard is. He can't place the voice just yet, but somewhere in this season, he is going to get some sort of clue. He'll see something or hear something and remember, this is where I was when I heard this voice. And it makes a lot of sense. If they've been following him for such a long time, she probably came up to him just, in plain sight, like, no big deal. This is, 10 years before anything happens. And they just have a conversation or something. And now he remembers that voice. And she's like, especially in a situation like that, you wouldn't think somehow someone will undistort our voices and, poof, we're good to go. They find us. So I don't know how that's going to play out, but that was really cool at the end when it's like, we all know that that's Roman, but I know who Shepard is. I just can't place it. So he knows who Shepard truly is. He knows her real identity. He just doesn't know what it is just yet. It's somewhere in his head. It's somewhere in his life. So that probably won't happen until like the middle of the season. That might not happen until like we get to like the winter break or whatever, and that'll be like our mid-season finale or something like that, or maybe mid-season premiere when it comes back. But I'm assuming that somewhere in this season we'll find out who Shepard truly is, and they'll just have to figure out a way to solve that issue. And maybe if they take out Shepard, maybe Roman might take over. That would be very interesting, because I don't know, considering he appears to be like the right-hand man, it could easily work where he transitions to, the height of power. But who knows if that would really work, tactician-wise. Like, I'm not sure how much of a tactician he truly is, because he's kind of like, all right, you're in the way now, gotta, stab you or shoot you or, snap your neck. So, don't know if that's where, things are headed, where he might actually end up taking over, and then it might actually end up being even harder for Jane to be sort of a double agent, because now she'll have more of an attachment, which has already begun in this episode. She'll have, a much greater attachment to her brother. So we'll see how it all plays out. But this is a really fun episode. I think this might actually be my favorite episode this season, because we had so many different stories. All of them I thought were really well done. Like even the Patterson thing with Robert, it was like, that's fine. It was a mini story. They didn't spend too much time on it, but it had an impact, and it was an important thing. It also made me think, I was like, man, I really hope he's not the spy, because I'm going to feel real stupid if I feel bad for him now and he turns out to be one of the bad guys. I'll be like, man, they tricked me. So that made me think of that during that scene after she called him David. I was like, I really hope he's not the spy, because I'm going to be real mad at them if they made me feel real sorry for him at this point. And then it's like he was the spy the whole time. So it made me think of that again, because I'm still on idea that he's probably the spy, but you know, we still don't know. You know, we don't know the stuff with Nas, if she's the spy, if that's just the obvious diversion, like, you know, like I mentioned before, it's like she's doing all the secretive spy stuff, and then it turns out to be like, yeah, I just kind of didn't trust you guys, and it's something simple. But really great episode, of course. Definitely want to know what you guys thought about it, so please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts, least favorite parts. And of course, this is a huge random theory question to ask you guys, but I would love to know how you guys think Weller, you know, came in contact with Shepard. I would assume, you know, like I said, she kind of came up to him, plainclothes sort of thing, long before the sandstorm stuff, you know, kind of started. And he was just really young, and that's why it's like, I remember that voice. It had to have been important, because you don't just remember a voice. And that's why I think it was either really important, or it would have to be more recent. But that's why I think it's more important than recent, because it would be much easier to remember, like, oh, this is what this person looks like, because I don't think they've seen any of, you know, either of them. They may have seen Roman, but I don't think they've actually seen footage of Shepard or anything like that. So it's one of those things, like, it either has to have been more recent, or it has to be something very important, something crucial from his life. And I don't know if it'll be as obvious as he talked to her during, like, the recording that Nas showed him or whatever at the ceremony. It might not be as obvious as that, where it's like, oh, that's where I remember her from, because that might be something that he would remember because he just saw the video, like, oh, put two and two together. But I would assume it's somewhere around that time. Maybe he was looking for positions kind of in what he has now, where he was going to these agencies, or when he was coming, you know, coming up through the ranks. She was in there somewhere before she left off to do, you know, the sandstorm thing. So a lot of possibilities, but I would love to know yours, so please, you know, comment below, let me know what you guys think about that, and of course, you know, what you guys thought about this episode in general, and of course, thanks for watching.